Good morning. Good morning. It's great to be here with all of you in this esteemed panel. My name is Christa Gannon. I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit called FLY, Fresh Lifelines for Youth, that works with juvenile justice and at-risk youth up in the Bay Area, helping them get a chance to transform their lives and help change our juvenile justice and criminal justice systems. I'm super personally excited about this from the youth development lens as a former college athlete and as a current youth basketball coach. And to be joined with this esteemed panel is pretty phenomenal. We're going to get into it here pretty quickly. And with me today, we've got Dr. D down at the end. Congratulations on the recent doctor, part of the Dr. D. An adjunct lecturer at USC. We have Michael Della Rocha right here next to me, the co-founder of Revolve Impact. Julio from Liberty Hill Foundation, who is running the youth justice work, and Nichol, the executive director of the LA Dodgers Foundation. Go Dodgers. Can we have a big round for all of them? So I thought I would start briefly by just grounding us all in the language. Renata did such a beautiful job in setting the context and framework for us this morning, and our charge is to really dive into the issue of PE as a social justice issue. And for the purposes of today, I know many of us have different definitions of social justice, but we're thinking about it as the collective effort to advance fairness, inclusion, and opportunity for all. And we're thinking about the PE part of our title as broader than physical education in schools. That part is critically important as well, and we know there's huge challenges, but also as the play equity movement, that where our young people live, the monies that their households come, their gender, their ethnicity, their culture, their sexual orientation, their ability shouldn't determine their ability to participate in sports. So that's the place that we are coming from this panel, and I'd love to start by just doing a round robin and having each of you share why are you personally so passionate about this issue of play equity as a social justice issue, and what about the challenges that we're facing concerns you the most? So why don't we just start right here?
Well, first off, I just want to say thank you to the LA 84 Foundation and all of you for coming. My name is Mike Della Rocha. I'm an organizer that happens to be an artist. I co-founded a company called Revolve Impact. We're a movement-building creative agency. We work with a lot of influential athletes and entertainers, raising their consciousness and connecting to the grassroots efforts. For me, I just think like this is the continuation, was mentioned earlier on the film, of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. I personally am the son of an immigrant father that came from Chihuahua, Mexico, and landed here out of his not wanting, and grew up in Boyle Heights. Was very influential in the Chicano movement of the 60s, and he always instilled in me this passion to make the world better. And then for me, I just feel not just necessarily responsibility, but I feel very honored to be here today. Because we're living in very frightening times, and I think oftentimes we don't really talk about the thing that really allows us to keep transforming ourselves in the world is stuff like this and the ability to really learn from each other and learn from the past.
It's kind of amazing to be in front of you all talking about sport. For me personally, sports changed my life. Like Mike, I grew up in a very tough neighborhood in Los Angeles called Pacoima, where it's often known as a gang reduction zone. I knew a lot of young people who have been victimized and killed and incarcerated. And for me, sports brought me self-esteem. It brought me the friends that I still call friends today. Helped me with my education. It helped bring my family together and connect every Saturday and Sunday. And I'm fortunate because, again, for 20 years I've been working in the field of philanthropy, and just last week I was part of a group that is working on a new $37 million youth development investment fund. And with that $37 million in my career, I've been a part of $100 million worth of grant making. And I take that very personal and serious and an obligation. And I thank all the coaches and the teachers and the after-school programs who created an opportunity for me to be a part of doing something what I love. So for all of you, for me, again, playing the sport, it wasn't just playing baseball. It was really connecting with my peers, with my community. And again, I wouldn't be on this stage without being introduced to sports. So thank you again for having me.
Good morning, everyone. For me personally, this issue is extremely important. I'm a daughter of immigrant parents, a first-generation college graduate, a college scholarship recipient, an inner city born and bred child, and I'm an African American female working in Major League Baseball. It means that on a day-to-day basis, I'm getting to tackle an issue that I think is very personal to me, and that I was the children that we serve. I was that child who may not necessarily have had that opportunity in front of them, and may not have had an equitable situation around me, but organizations, whether they be nonprofit organizations, corporations, mentors, and people took a liking to what they saw in me and changed my trajectory. And I believe that this play equity issue is really about changing the trajectory of a lot of children who are vulnerable and can potentially be left behind.
Good morning. I think myself, like many of the people on this stage, which I'm happy to be here with you, a very esteemed group. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and my first love was the sport of basketball. And I was just talking about this yesterday during lunch with my friends, that basketball, in fact, saved my life. When you're a teenager, you go through a lot of things, especially when you grew up in the inner city. I lost my dad, my best friend to gun violence, lots of different things. And the day after my dad died, I had a team to go to. And I played in the game, and it made me feel a part of something, and that I still had a family. And not only did basketball give me that support system that I needed, it employed me with a skill set that I think without it, I wouldn't know what it means to lead. I think more importantly, I wouldn't know what it means to lose. And so I think when we look at the issue of play equity, we have to look at what it means for our kids not to get certain skill sets, because coachable kids are employable kids. And I think that through sports and the lack thereof, our kids are missing out on a huge opportunity at life.
Dr. D, can you talk a little bit about why this is so important from a youth development perspective?
Just to add some context to that, I spent the last 7 years of my career at an organization called Brotherhood Crusade, and served as our director of trauma-informed youth development during that time. And what I learned is that in youth development, without the access to sports, the access to meaningful after-school program and play, the health indicators go down. Students are less likely to perform academically. Students are less likely to possess social skills, leadership skills. Again, all of these skills that essentially are going to prepare these young people to become great citizens in our economy. And so I think that many of the people here in the room, lots of great organizations, they work daily with the same end goal in mind, that we want to develop this whole child. And sports and play, in fact, develops the whole child.
Well, how do we as a movement make sure that this is a whole movement? Because there's so much intersectionality here, right? We've got issues of gender, of immigration status, of economic status, of corrupt sports, of lack of positive coaches. How do we move forward together, united, and how do we start to address the intersectionality of all these issues that land right on the playing field?
First of all, we got to get all of the adults to play in the sandbox. No pun intended. Each of those issues are equally important, and I think that oftentimes we become siloed in this work, and when you become siloed, you lose the vision. And I think for all of us in this room and our organizations, the vision is to create and help to build this whole child. And so it comes with collaboration. And I think this is a great time. So when we go out to lunch, everybody shake hands, be friends, and figure out what it is that your peers are doing and how you can help them. And then the inverse of that, and how they can help you. Because it's the old adage, it truly takes a village to raise a child, and not one of these issues are more important than the other, because all of these issues pour into the lives of our young people. So each of us just have to play our role.
Julio, I know in the foundation world you've been a part of and seen a lot of collaborations. Have you seen an example of where there's been good collaboration to what Dr. D is talking about?
Yeah, I think, just to build off that, number one, I think we're really, being in Southern California in the philanthropic sector, we were really fortunate to have the LA 84 Foundation, right? Especially take this issue on, and I just want to congratulate them. I think, one of the roles that philanthropy can play is as not just as a grant maker, but as a convener, as a thought leader, as a information broker. I think what LA84 has been able to do under Renata's leadership and Anne-Marie Jones is really bring people together to understand, to the point that was made earlier, that kids don't come in pieces. Are we ahead of the curve? Probably not. I think there's ways to go. I think oftentimes when we think of sport, much like the way we think about the arts, we think that's the cherry on top. It is still not baked into our intersectionality strategy, right? It's still seen as feels good, maybe we'll think about it, but it's not seen as high, in my opinion, as the work that we do on health, as an education, even though it all plays into that. We've already know the research that young people who are engaged in sport are healthier, they're more socially, emotionally connected, they're ingrained in practice. And so I think philanthropy here locally, I mean, we're really fortunate to have some really great key foundations that have made really large, significant contributions. But I think we have to really embrace that narrative that we do have a fairness issue here. Not every young person in Los Angeles County has an equal access to play. And we have to take that as a very serious kind of marching order from on our sector, because again, I think what we know is that we do have the Brotherhood Crusades, who are amazing, who are serving thousands of young people, but we also know that there's thousands of young people that don't have access to that type of organization in a place like Palmdale or Lancaster or other parts of the county that are geographically isolated. But again, I think this is a step in the right direction.
Mike, I know you've had a lot of really great experience in being a part and leading grassroots movements to change policy, to change hearts, to change minds. Can you share some of the lessons learned from your past experiences that you think we should be pull forward as we work through this Play for All and really fight for play equity?
Yeah, I'm really honored to be a part of a group called Athletes for Impact. Ibtihaj Muhammad is a part of it that was on the panel before. It's a global network of athletes, current and former, that have committed their lives to really using their platforms to amplify existing grassroots efforts. In real time right now, the largest bailout of people in U.S. history is happening in New York, where athletes themselves are donating, posting bail, and coming forward to basically empty 2 jails in New York on Rikers Island that are filled with women and young people that are only there not because they've been convicted of a crime, but because they're too poor to post bail. And so some of the things that I've really learned is 2 things. Number one is, Dr. Carlos and Tommy and Colin and everybody else, there's real consequences on people's lives, whether they be known or unknown, real consequences on their daily earnings. It's no surprise to me when Dr. Carlos is not only ostracized, but has death threats that was also said. There's concrete physical kind of threats to people's lives. And so the solution that I would say, number one, is there's such power in numbers, like in this room, that the more that we can come together and stand in solidarity, that's really important. And then number 2, I would say, is the America today looks very different than the America of yesterday. And the predominant demo that we have to really be informed by and led by is multicultural youth and Latinx youth in particular. We have to find a way to continue to build multicultural, multi-identity kind of coalitions to move the work forward. And I just want to also just give credit where credit's due. We put a lot of emphasis recently, like Anna Colin, but it was actually the women and the black women of the WNBA that stood up first. And historically, it's always been black women that have actually stood up before everybody else. And so I say that because we have to be mindful of our power and our privilege when we come up to different stages or places and really center the most marginalized at the center of our movement, because then all of us will get free together. So,
do you see a policy solution here as well when it comes to legislation, initiatives? Are there hopeful movements on those fronts on the horizon?
Well, I think like Julio, to piggyback off of Julio, I think PE as a social justice issue is a policy issue. When we think about either school boards making decisions or council members or supervisors, we have to ensure that they know that this is a core component to our own health and well-being, and that it should not be secondary but really centered, and it shouldn't be up to, I'm so appreciative of the LA Dodgers and the foundation, but it should be up to our policymakers to actually put forward the betterment of our young people. And so to me, the policy is actually physical education is a human right, should be mandated all 5 days of the school year, of the week. And so to me, that's the policy that I think could be really driven forward.
Speaking of the Dodgers, all of the great work that you're leading off the field, how do you feel that sports foundations are doing in this space? What are they doing well? How can we do better? How can we push them? What's your assessment?
So I think we're doing better, and we have a long way to go. I think that any sports team foundation has this clear, significant responsibility to the communities that we serve. I think Julio probably put it best in that here in Los Angeles, we're probably not as far as we would like to be with this particular issue. When we think about and we hear the stats that Renata puts out there regarding, the public school system and the lack of physical education and the lack of sports opportunities, I think that we all truly need to provide more resources. We at the Dodgers Foundation, we have a program called Dodgers RBI, Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities. And our goal really is, yes, to increase participation in the sports of both baseball and softball. But ideally, we see ourselves as a sports-based youth development program. Mm-hmm. We see ourselves being able to lend a very credible voice and brand to such a significant issue as play equity. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, there's so many benefits, as Dr. D mentioned, to youth participating in sports. And when we think about college readiness, when we think about it being an intervention to the schools to prison pipeline, mm-hmm. when we think about just clear engagement, it's very, very important. As we see it, when you think about the social, emotional, positive character development that can come out of that. And when we see in the working force today, all of us, and we hear people talk about what sport they played and who they were, we know why Julio is who he is, right? Like, he was a baseball player. He actively participated in sport. Sport actively impacted so many of our lives that for us to sit back as a sports team foundation, such a huge entity with such power, and say we're going to do nothing about it, is irresponsible and just can't happen. At the Dodgers Foundation, we see ourselves as leaders and sort of examples, and we hope that several sports team foundations will follow the lead, whether it be here in Los Angeles or across the country, in understanding that we can actually be an addendum. We can really help to make this opportunity in whatever sport it is available to so many different youth, but see it from the lens of the massive opportunity, which is creating Major League citizens, not necessarily creating Major League Baseball players. Mm.
What do you think is the biggest challenge that organizations and foundations and leaders like you in particular face in making that happen?
In addition to the fact that was already said that it is not, this issue is not loud enough, I think the biggest challenge is partners, is people coming together in this space to scream and to shout and to make people understand that just the way in which education is a clear determinant to a youth's future, and the same way in which health is, sports is as well, and it actually overlaps in that education and health space. So I think there's a little bit of a lack of understanding and a lack of people in the youth development space. I think sports is loud. We're all talking about, we're going to the World Series next week, right? So sports is loud. It's not that sports is not loud, it's that sports-based youth development is not loud. Is not loud, or I should say loud enough right now. But I think we can get there. I think we can get there.
Why? Why do you think we're not loud enough?
It's interesting, and just to, so at Liberty Hill, we are embarking on trying to do two things at the same time. So, we have the largest back-end system where it's the largest child welfare system. We spend $2.4 billion in LA County alone for foster youth. We spend $537 million to arrest, incarcerate, and put young people under probation. We know we don't need that, but it is so fascinating to me when we talk about what we want, we struggle to actually talk about that. Right. So to Nicole's point, we need more folks to be in this conversation, especially to Mike's point around the people who are making the decisions around policy. Because when you go and you share with them the science or research, we know exactly what works. We just have not implemented that. And this is why I think this body, this group of people that are here, you are the experts, right? We need you in those spaces. Philanthropy needs to reach out to you. We need to support that. We need to come together in a unified way, break down the silos, because there's a lot of silos. That's not my lane. But what's interesting is at Liberty Hill, we've been trying to convene all these different partners to, number one, shrink and close that justice system that takes so much of our kids away from that pathway of success, and really work towards this North Star. We have the largest juvenile justice system, the largest child welfare system in the country. We do not have the largest youth development system, funded system in the country. Why not?
How is play equity doing in reaching the most marginalized of the marginalized, our juvenile justice kids, our incarcerated kids?
Well, again, I think I used an example earlier. Again, we're really fortunate to have a Brotherhood Crusade. So the Brotherhood Crusade has been in partnership with LA County Probation, which again is the largest probation system in the country and actually in the world. We currently have 6,500 kids on probation under the age of 18. Many of them are there not for anything that is a threat to public safety. It's actually because they were born in the wrong zip code, and we over-police them and we over-incarcerate them. And so what Brotherhood Crusade has been able to do in partnership with the probation department is provide them those pathways of success, get them a mentor, get them into sport, get them connected back to their family. And rocket science, they're doing well. They're doing better. They're doing well in the community. And so again, we're really fortunate to have a Brotherhood Crusade, but we need more of that. We need more of those resources to go back into the community, not into a system that punishes and let's be clear, when we say punish our kids, we're punishing black and brown kids in Los Angeles County. 98% of kids that are incarcerated at this given day are black and brown kids.
Are our kids' voices in this movement of play equity? Are there examples that you all have seen where our young people are a part of this and are out front? Are we empowering them to be a part of this and to be the ones helping us with the solutions? Dr. D?
I think, again, we can get better. LA 84, for instance, does a great job of providing opportunities for our young people to utilize their voices to advocate for their communities. However, I think systemically, we have to do a much better part of intentionally bringing and lifting up that youth voice. Oftentimes, we adults, I've hit the age of 30. I feel grown now. We feel like we know what's right for our young people, and we oftentimes push our thoughts and our ideologies on them rather than bringing them to the table and being a conversation during the planning process. We can't just have our youth show up for the photo op. They really need to be able to help us build and be a part of this movement. And in fact, I'd argue that they need to be leading this movement in play equity, and we'll see, I think, progress at a much faster rate.
Yeah. I just want to say, to be clear, I think we are here right now because of young people. If you look at the Black Lives Matter movement or the Indigenous First Nations movement, even the Dreamers, they were all young people in their teens that were sacrificing their bodies for us to have these real conversations. So I think the opportunity is really to connect, because movement builders right now, they actually are young. And they actually have been impacted by sports, and maybe we need to just uplift that, because we don't want to silo it out, because I am very grateful for the young people in LA County in particular, like the Youth Justice Coalition. Everything that Julio has talked about has been young people driving on the advocacy and then the ideas and the imagination. And when I look at this figure of Tommy and Norman and Dr. Carlos, they were in their early teens, and if not younger. And so I just want to just put a pin to not overlook that we are here because of young people in America today, and that we just got an opportunity to really bridge a lot of these gaps.
When Renata was talking in the opener and she mentioned Kylan Moore, I think some of us saw him at last year's conference and some of us have seen him at others as well. I thought about how I think what at the Dodgers Foundation, what myself and my team can probably do better is we have Kylan Moores. We're not uplifting them. Yeah. They're not telling their stories as vocally as some of the other issues. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us to put youth on a platform to be advantageous to their peers and to tell their stories about how play and sports is truly impacting them. I think, Dr. D, you started on a story in the beginning about what basketball did for your life, and there's real stories there. There are real stories, and we hear them every single day, and I think it's just a point of uplifting them and making them understand that they actually should be leading this movement, and to your point, we're here because of them.
Well, and how important it is for us to support them in the aftermath of what that looks like, because that pressure of being a leader, a face, and what that does to our young people, and how do we make sure we approach that holistically. I'm also curious, running a nonprofit in the Bay Area, the talk about ROI and collective impact and measurements and outcomes, storytelling and outcomes sometimes aren't seen as being the same. So I'm curious as to what you think about the impact. How do we talk about the impact? What's the pressure that the movement is under in terms of how we produce metrics or numbers as opposed to stories and anecdotes? Julio, do you want to start? Because I know from the foundation world you see this a lot on the funder side as well as the work you do in the government.
Actually, I'm going to defer to Nichol. I mean, I'll come back to you. Yeah. I will. But I think it's really important to hear from someone who's actually centered in this. I think, we're all part of the youth development field, but it would be good to hear from you directly, Nichol, because the interface that you have with many more foundations than I do would be, I think, important for this audience to hear.
Okay. So a couple different things. We believe that the so what is clearly important. Yeah. We believe that we should be able to have a conversation as a direct sports programmer with somebody like Julio and tell him, what is our sports program doing for youth? What are the outcomes? What are the outcomes? What are the outputs? So you think about it from the perspective of, yes, at the end of the day, to your point, we've got great stories and we can throw quotes and photos all over the place and it looks cute and, oh, look at those kids with the Dodger players and all that. That's fantastic. We implement a serious metric system, a measurement and evaluation system across our sports programming that essentially helps us identify key metrics. We set goals from the beginning. We've implemented metrics that are literally helping us to measure those social emotional skills like self-confidence, et cetera. Across the country, there's actually some great organizations like Hello Insights. They used to formerly be Algorithm and some others who are helping to create these pilots where we're able to compare youth in our programs with others across the country and really let people see the impact, right? So how are kids building self-confidence? How is teamwork measured? How is leadership measured? And then tie those things to zip codes and things of that nature to then see, are these programs reducing gang violence? Are these programs helping communities increase pride and things of that nature? So there are very many ways right now and very much metrics to put towards youth sports programming in order to show clear outcomes. Again, I don't think that a lot of the funders are open quite yet to hearing what this measurement and evaluation system looks like. We take it very seriously. We have an analyst on the team at the Dodgers Foundation. People ask me all the time, why do you have an analyst? Because just like an education nonprofit, just like a health nonprofit, it's our responsibility to be measuring on a day-to-day basis and answering the question of so what? So you're giving jerseys and equipment. So you're making sure that these kids have what they need and they're playing baseball, you're building baseball fields and all of that. What is it doing? And so on a regular basis, I do believe there's a really adequate way to measure sports programming, to show the outcomes, and then to put the right programs in place, implement to make sure that you're moving forward.
Well, and Dr. D, I'm curious for you because I know being on the youth development side, there's a lot of challenges we face with language, and we've talked about the intersectionality that it's health, it's education, it can be reduction in gang violence. So how you're talking about the work you're doing, if the foundation or government world isn't hearing it, you don't quite fit, but yet you do. How did you deal with that challenge leading programs?
I think it's very important to stick to your bread and butter. For instance, my entire career up until now was at the Crusade, so I speak much of the work that we did, and our bread and butter was youth development and increasing academic performance and increasing social emotional behavior metrics and reducing discipline incidents in school and not getting outside of that and just understanding that this here is our part in the fight. And then we go to Nichol at the Dodgers Foundation and say, hey, how do we get some of our youth involved in this RBI program? Because This, in turn, is going to reduce those incidents of discipline during school. This is going to increase their academic performance. This is going to improve their social, emotional behavior. But I think for many of us in the room, it is really hard to not try to be everything to everyone because we're good people. We nonprofit and foundation folks, we want to change the world. That's what makes us wake up in the morning. And so I think it's really just understanding your why and going back to this idea of data. And that data essentially not only gives you your why, but it holds you accountable as an organization. And not only does it hold you accountable because we signed up and said, hey, young person, I am in this to help change your life, but now I can go to the funders and now hold you accountable because here's the data and this is why you should show up for me for these young people.
And that's part of why I wanted to defer the question, because my learning came from the partners that did the work. So in no way was I going to be a funder that assumed that you should be doing X, Y, Z, and this was going to be the result of it.
Can you be talking to other funders about that, please?
One of the things I joke all the time is if you know one foundation, you know one foundation. And I wish I can change that narrative for you. I think we're trying in LA to be better partners across the aisle. So, Liberty Hill is really trying to be that convener of funders and donors to really let go, right? There's a power dynamic of, I think sometimes philanthropy is really closely connected to like academic institutions. Like we think we're really smart, but we can't do our work without our partners on the ground. Let's not forget that, but it's really hard to let go of that. But I think with this issue, we really need our partners to guide us, to let us know where we can be helpful, how to bring people together, how to break down those silos, and really how to measure success. One of the grants I made early on, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, was to a Little League in Pacoima. This is my backyard. And one of their measures of success was parents volunteering. Wasn't on my radar. I wouldn't even thought about it. But they're like, look, after 3 years of your investment, 87% of the parents are still volunteering. Measure of success. Great. So I think, again, the learning really has to come from the ground up.
Well, before we turn it over for some insights from the audience, can we do a rapid fire call to action? Because I love how we started off, that it's action is what matters. So what 1 to 2 actions can you put out as an invitation for us to think about taking one away with us to help advance play equity?
I would just say movements are made of people. So the one thing I'd say is look to the right or left of you. Everyone here came for a reason and a purpose, and make the relationships, because the relationships are what drive social change. And you may not know, you may be sitting next to like Beatriz Acevedo, who I saw in the room, who's a dear friend and a rock star in the landscape. You may be sitting next to the next leader that we're talking about, or the leader right now. And so I would just say relationships are so important. So take advantage of this opportunity of this convening to meet somebody that you didn't know before you came in.
I always joke that, I have a kitchen cabinet of 10 people, and those 10 people are kind of like my mentors, and I think about who introduced me to those 10. So the person to the right of me, my brother Mike, has introduced me to 6 of them. So part of my job is to share Mike with the world. But to Mike's point, you came to this event, stay together.
Right.
Can you imagine you all showing up to city council or the county board of supervisors collectively? That's power. You have voice. You are the real experts. And collectively, I think this conversation would go a long way if we actually broke down some of those. Again, we're talking about sport. Let's be clear. There's also competition. Right. Philanthropy doesn't help, right? We fund some, we don't fund others. And so sometimes it's really hard to work across the aisle because you're giving up some of that power, but this is where change is going to happen.
I think 2 things. One, to echo both Mike and Julio's thoughts, the secret sauce is partnership. A lot of our partners are actually our guests today, so I think we need to all continue to just really, push that, right? Is partnership, and we probably do need to go to city council. And secondly, I think it's simply join the Play for All movement. Yeah. I think that we need to use the platform that LA 84 Foundation has created for us, and we need to make this big and loud and scream and shout and just blow it out.
I think in this space, we are working super hard and our heads are down. So I tasked you to look up, because just in front of you is going to be that friend or that partner is going to help to make that world a difference. And I think in closing, just remember your why. The what without the why in this play space means nothing.